Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark. And before we get started, I want to remind you to go over and do a couple things, just some housekeeping. Go over to Superbrand Publishing on YouTube and like us over there. If you haven't left a review for us for Promote, Profit, Publish, please leave us a review. You're listening, so why not talk about it? And then if you haven't already, go over and take our Promote, Profit, Publish quiz at profitpublish.com. So my guest today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Her name is Minette Riordan, and she's a doctor, first of all. I should have mentioned that. Dr. Minette Riordan. And she's a modern day Renaissance woman, transformational artist, writer, award-winning entrepreneur, and advocate for creativity as essential to the well-being of all people and our planet. A popular speaker, Minette has appeared on television, radio, and podcasts around the globe. She's built 3 successful businesses, worked with thousands of business owners, and published 3 books, including her bestseller, The Artful Marketer. She has it right behind her head if you're watching on YouTube. Life took her by surprise in 2017 when people started asking her to buy people started asking if they could buy her paintings. And she said, I'm not an artist. And this was kind of the turning point in her life and her career. And since then, she's been selling art and teaching others to courageously sell their own artistry through coaching and online programs and live events. And I probably should have put a comma there because she's actually creating a space where people can learn to sell their own. Minette is the creator of the Conscious Creativity Method, which is trademarked, a simple and effective transformational process for supporting others to activate creativity and connect to the artist within them. So welcome, Minette.
Thanks for having me.
Now for those of you guys watching, that's your art right behind you, isn't it?
It is. Yep.
Very nice. I'm about as unartistic as they come. Well, in the visual artistic. I'm a pretty good mystery writer, but what you're doing is something entirely different. I'm like a finger painter.
I love finger painting. There's probably some finger painting in there, and I realized I was painting this morning, and even though I washed my hands, of course I have paint all over my fingers, but at least it's not red and looks like I've been dipping my fingers in blood today.
Blood. There you go. See, we should collaborate. I could mystery write murders and you could look like you committed them in real life.
That would be so much fun. I'm new to painting. Like if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I was a painter or an artist, I would have said, no, I'm a writer, I'm a scholar, I'm a business owner, but I'm new to painting.
That is so interesting. So maybe I should give it a try beyond finger painting. So you're writing, you're doing all these things in the creative world. And one of the things that I noticed that you and I actually talked about was people who don't think they can make money at it, number one. And number two, that mental sort of sabotage block that comes when we go to sell our work. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And it's not just artists, I think, who struggle with selling their work. I think people that are new to business have a hard time selling their work. So I think sales is one of those things that feels tricky for a lot of people because we've been raised to have this kind of standoffish, back away, don't be a used car salesman. Like no one ever taught us that it was actually okay to sell. And if you're like me, 55, growing up, you're not supposed to brag, you're not supposed to, toot your own horn. Like, so there's so many mindset issues that are around this conversation around selling. And I think, if we dig into that even deeper, what artists struggle with the most is pricing over selling. And how do I put a price tag on something that's so near and dear to my heart and that maybe I spent hundreds of hours working on because I'm a procrastinator and a perfectionist and, I never thought it was quite good enough yet to put out there. So there's so many different questions that we can ask around why is it so hard for artists to sell their work? But I think maybe the biggest one is that our work is so precious to us. We see it as this extension of ourselves and who we're being. And it's like this, baby that we've given birth to. And it's really, really hard to put a price tag on it.
It is. And for those of you around our age group, because I'm a little bit older than Minette, one thing that was constantly, my father always said, if you have to tell everybody how good you are, you may not be that good. So that's the kind of mindset we grew up with too on that. Um, the pricing, well, let's get more into the baby. So you talked about, giving birth. And I used to, when I spoke at writers conferences, I used to talk about, what's really scary for writers is, let's say, you've given birth to this book and you're pushing it down the street in a baby cart and somebody lifts up the blanket. We're all afraid that they're going to say, oh my God, that's the ugliest baby I've ever seen. And believe it or not, there's that fear there that people are going to hate it.
Yeah. And that was a big part of what it was for me personally when people started asking to buy my paintings, and the thought of actually putting them up for sale and putting a price tag on them, it felt like there was this big gap between, oh, people say it's pretty on Facebook and people think it's pretty enough to buy it and hang it in their home. Like there's, something sort of really honoring about that and pretty scary about that. Will they like it enough to pay for it? So I was already getting lots of likes and comments and feedback, but I had to get over this mental gap of thinking that just because they thought it was pretty on Facebook meant that they would actually pay money for it. And the truth was, people do pay money for my art all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's not my primary business. So it actually feels even more fun when it sells. And I do mostly just sell it on Facebook and Instagram. Mostly Facebook. I just put it out there, and if people like it, they buy it. Or when I was on a Zoom call this week, and somebody pointed out I have this beautiful Phoenix painting in my office, and they're like, I want that Phoenix painting. And I sold a painting having a Zoom call, or I host live events in my home, and people come into the studio and walk out with paintings. Like, I've made literally thousands of dollars from people just seeing my art and buying it that way. But I had to get over the gap internally and personally around believing that people would actually pay money for my art and hang it in their homes.
And that is so true. I found that with books as well. When you write mystery novels, it is more artistic than just a regular fiction book. And I used to tell people, they'd say, oh, I want to read it. And I go, oh, well, don't have really high expectations because I'm a great storyteller, but not a great writer. And it's always interesting because I was on a radio show last week and the woman's like, why would you say that? I thoroughly enjoyed your book. And, there's always like that thing we think that maybe it's not as good as somebody else's, or maybe we're always comparing our people. And I think with the visual art, it's even worse because
it is. I'm not Picasso, right? I mean, I didn't go to art school. I have a PhD in poetry, not painting, right? So, it's like we get caught up in our thoughts about how we think things have to be. And I think the mindset piece of this impacts business owners at all levels of business. And in fact, I was on a class this morning that I'm taking that's really, really wonderful for coaches. And he made a comment about how we're all salespeople. All of us, all the time. If you're in business, you're a salesperson. I mean, anybody with kids knows kids are amazing salespeople. They're trying to sell you all the time. Can I stay out a little later? Do I really have to go to bed now? And it's like, if we just remember that we're all in the field of the art of persuasion all of the time, we can start to get over that mindset hump and start to get over that voice of your dad and my mom, that it's not okay to brag. And, that if you have to point out, I love that. If you have to point out that you're doing a good job, then you probably aren't doing a good job. And yet the biggest distinction they say between men and women in the workplace is that men will ask for what it is that they want long before they may fit the requirements or be ready, but they're willing to ask, whereas women wait till they have every I dotted, every T crossed, and they have like 2 times the qualifications required before they actually ask for a raise, ask for a promotion, or ask for a particular job. And I think it's the confidence piece that impacts most of us most deeply, and that impacts us no matter what industry or field that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. So at the beginning, I thought creativity is one thing, you think it's another thing. How do you define that?
How do I define creativity?
Yes.
Such a great question. So I believe that we're all creative. First of all, I'll just say that. I think that creativity has nothing to do with art making, that art is one expression of creativity, but creativity most often is just defined as the combination of ideas, old ideas into something new. Like it's really that simple. Like imagine that all the colors in the universe flow from three colors, red, blue, and green, right? That's it. And or red, blue, and yellow, sorry. And that we can take those three colors and make the most infinite palette of color options. It's absolutely amazing, right? And if you give a kid, I'm writing an article right now on creative constraints for a magazine. And so I was just doing some research and about how if you give someone 6 Lego bricks, there's like literally hundreds and hundreds of combinations possible of ways that you can combine 6 Lego bricks. Like, so it's this idea of taking a constraint, a limitation, something that's in front of us and going, how can I make this better, prettier? There's a reason why artists and writers are terrified of the blank page and the blank canvas. That's the worst place to be when there's like nothing on the page. And so we have to learn to get a few words down or to get some marks down on the canvas to inspire us to move forward. But again, creativity, simply put, is new combinations of existing ideas, articles, colors, etc.
Oh, that's really great. So you're going to love this next question. Many years ago, I had a big group of writers on Google Plus, back when Google Plus. So y'all know how long it was now.
Yeah.
And I realized after a year that these people were on there, but what I had was not a group of people who would go in and buy our services. I had a bunch of starving artists.
Mm.
So I know there's a lot out there with the starving artist work that these are people who don't get the connection between creativity and prosperity. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. I could talk about this one for days, about the connection between creativity and prosperity. I think the first thing is that every artist and writer needs to see themselves as an entrepreneur, or at least as a business owner. Most of them don't identify as entrepreneurs, but they need to see that they actually have a business. If they're selling products and services, they have a business. So I think the mindset of what it means to sell is a big step. We already talked about how important just getting comfortable with selling our products and services is. But then the next piece of that is really treating your art like a business. And people say, well, that takes the creativity out of it. It takes the fun out of it. It takes the flow out of it. And it actually doesn't. It's actually very, very rewarding. And at the end of the day, we do have to create things that people want to buy, right? We have to create things that people want to buy. That doesn't mean we have to imitate what other people are doing, that we can't be innovative and exciting and come up with new things, but it does mean that we're not creating in a vacuum. I personally think the starving artist mentality is a choice, and we can choose to believe in that mentality, or we can choose to believe in the possibility that we can be a thriving, abundant artist. And there is evidence, there is so much proof in the world right now today that you can make a great living as a writer, as an artist, as an entrepreneur. There is abundant evidence that you can make money as an artist. In fact, I would argue it's easier than ever to do that than it has ever been before. I think artists are often starving because they don't know how to build businesses. Art schools, and my son is a junior in university and he's in art school right now. They're not teaching him how to build a business. They're teaching him how to be an artist. And that's what their job is. That's what he's going to school for. And I think it's a disservice. So I think that we're producing all of these amazing artists from amazing writers programs and art schools and music schools, but we're not giving them any practical real world skills on how to make money and how to think about money as our friend and one of the most important aspects of our life going forward. So a lot of starving artists just don't know what they don't know. So learning basic business skills, I think, is essential for anyone that considers themselves to be a creative, if we go for a little bit broader term.
You know, that is so true. I think of a lot of things at university. My first degree is in ornamental horticulture. And one of the things that was so cumbersome about that major was that we had labs where we actually did things. And I look at even my own son's education in business. and he knows a lot of things, but he doesn't know how to practically apply them in the real world. And I think the same is true for artists. You can go out and create good work, but if you don't know the business basics,
Yeah.
you're going to be stuck.
It's
So,
true. It's true.
and
I met a delightful young woman on an airplane coming home from somewhere. And we got into conversation, and she was in graduate school somewhere in, I think, Tennessee. And so I was telling her about what I did, and she was telling me about her dreams and goals. I don't even remember what her graduate program was in. But she said, nobody's telling us what our options are once we get out of grad school, because long gone are sort of the super attractive tenure track positions for continuing on as a professor and a researcher. Right now, there's very few tenure track positions left. It's not a safe, secure job situation, but yet they're not educating them about what are their other options. And it's a funny tangent for us to take. But I think given the times that we're in right now, becoming an entrepreneur is one of the best things that you can do. And it's also one of the scariest things for most people to do because of the conversations around sales, marketing, and money. Those three things. It's not lack of talent in whatever our genius is or whatever our industry is, but it's lack of know-how in the practical aspects of how do I get this thing started and how do I talk about what it is that I do in a way that I move people closer towards me so that they want to come and play with me and buy my goods and services.
I totally agree with that. So how, for those people out there who they just think they're not creative, they don't, like they have no idea, how does someone get started with something like that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been talking a lot about is this distinction between creativity and artistry. And the word artistry simply means skill or talent. So every single one of us is an artist. Every single one of us is an artist. And we all have very creative ways of looking at the world. And all of us have a talent and a genius. And the way that we connect to our creativity, I think, is one, first of all, to remind ourselves what we're really good at and how are the ways we're doing what we do different than anyone else does, just to be reminded of how creative we are. That's one way. The second way is to remember what were the things that you loved to do as a child that you don't make time for anymore. Like one of the ones that comes up for me personally, and I hear it from a lot of other people, is building forts. Whether you were building them outside in the trees or on a rainy day in the living room with every spare sheet and blanket in the house, like building forts and imaginary worlds and, having these, battles and games and places and hiding in the fort with the flashlights and the books and the candy. Like so much happened inside these forts that we used to build. I haven't built a fort in a long time, but where else could I create that imaginative play space? So that would be one thing. I hear from people, that they used to draw or they used to take ballet classes or they played an instrument. So we all had that childlike sense of creative awe and wonder. So anything we can do to reconnect to that childlike sense of play can instantly spark our creativity. And then the third thing that I would share is that you have to make time for creativity. You have to make time for creative play. That might be taking a class, it might be buying a coloring book, or grabbing a sketch pad, or if you write music, to write some music. Like just finding time, 15-minute little chunks of time, not hours and hours. There's a myth that we need hours and hours and hours of time to be in flow states and to be creative. We don't. We need 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that 15 minutes gives us joy, it eases stress, and it makes our brain think outside the box and come up with new connections and ideas. Like I'm a huge fan of the coloring book craze because it allows people's bodies and minds to relax. And while we're coloring, our mind is still thinking. And all of a sudden we see new connections, new possibilities. So making time for creative play 15 minutes at a time, I think is something that's super, super important. So childlike wonder, reminding yourself how creative you are already and whatever your given area of expertise or talent is, and then making time for play would be my 3 ways to start reconnecting to our creativity.
That's great. And I find with me, if I go hiking, I kind of get, like if I'm stuck, it kind of loosens all that up too. Just the
connection
being
to
out in nature. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
being out there.
Yeah.
So we talked about your personal journey. Why do you think? I mean, you've kind of gone through your ups and downs with it, but why do you think creativity is such a hot topic today? We kind of see it
Mhm.
everywhere.
Mhm. So there's a few different reasons. First of all, IBM did a study about 10 years ago of 1,500 CEOs from companies around the world. And those CEOs cited creativity as the number one trait needed by today's leaders. So that kind of started a whole conversation. And it kind of mirrored actually when coloring books kind of hit. And coloring books have been in the top 10 bestsellers on Amazon for a decade. Right? And you see them everywhere now in the grocery store checkout line. There's coloring books right beside O Magazine. So they're everywhere. So that's, one thing was the IBM study. LinkedIn, the last 2 years in a row, 2018 and 2019, cited creativity as the number one soft skill needed by people today in doing, can you imagine how much data LinkedIn has? It kind of gets me all giddy and excited thinking about their data. And they do a list of the 5 soft skills and then what hard skills companies are seeking in new hires. And creativity has topped the list the last 2 years in a row. And I think that what's happened is as we've seen a decline in schools in funding for the arts, that kids are not thinking as creatively as they used to. We're not seeing as much innovation and creativity. As companies continue to look for new ways to compete in the global marketplace, they're calling for more innovation, more ideas, more new. And yet they're also forcing people to be so productive. They're not creating spaciousness for the dreaming needed. And there's not support, there's not safe spaces being created for those conversations to happen. So I think it's a combination of factors, but I think as a lot of things are in big business, it's driven by economics, right? That people want more innovation, they want to stay competitive in the marketplace. At the same time, on the personal and hobby side of things, creativity has never been a hotter topic over there, because I also think people are desperate for new ways to relax, to relieve stress, to play. I think there is a sense of longing to reconnect to our creativity. We're being asked to be more creative at work, but if we're not feeling creative and playful at home, there's a disconnect that's happening. So I think it's a fascinating to watch right now what's happening both in the personal hobby industry as well as in sort of the global marketplace. Both sides are calling for more creativity. There's more membership subscription models, online classes available for people to take, art classes of every kind online right now. One of the biggest and most successful being Creative Live, which has an amazing suite of programs in everything from how to use Photoshop to how to do art journaling.
Wow. It'll be interesting when this whole thing gets over with COVID-19 to
Yeah.
see what this generation does with that creativity, because all of a sudden you're down to homeschooling 2 or 3 hours a day. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that contributed a lot in our childhoods was not only the fort building, but, our parents would shove us out the door at 8 a.m. and don't come
Yes.
back unless somebody's dead or hungry.
Or
And
bleeding. Yes.
yeah, or bleeding. And so, we had that time to build these massive Hot Wheels and, all sorts of things that
Yeah.
I just don't feel like kids today do, because we become such a helicopter parents, and
Yeah.
everything's so scheduled. And it'll be interesting to see what this does to creativity, because I think you'll find when kids have more time on their own to dream without somebody breathing down their neck, it really is
Yeah.
a better creative space.
If parents will control the amount of time they're spending on their devices.
Yes,
Right. So
that is.
which is a whole nother conversation. But I think that, there's certainly a lot of things that can certainly increase creativity. It's a different, way of being creative. So my kids were big into Minecraft. I have an 18 and a 21-year-old who still like to play Minecraft, and it's super, super creative, but it doesn't beat building with actual Legos, right? That physical hand-eye coordination of manipulation and putting things together in the visual planning. So I'm hopeful not just for kids, but for adults right now as well, that they have some spaciousness in their lives and that they use that to actually, so I would have a call for hobbies. I would make a case for hobbies, right? Because I think it's something that we don't make time for. and are driven, and I'm, the queen of, super overachiever driven, but I can't tell you how much the painting means to me personally. Like, it's fun that it sells, but it's my personal solace, my personal meditation, the thing that I go to lift my spirits and bring me joy. And so I think we'll see a return to hobbies. Knitting has already become super popular again, but I think we'll see more people turning right now to making music, to dancing in their living rooms, to making art, to sewing their own clothes. Like, I think there's going to be this opportunity to reconnect to that innate sense of us that is longing for more creative expression.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we have a couple generations of kids who have become adults that are so scheduled they don't have hobbies because they ran from one place to another.
Yeah.
Where can we find you if we want to connect? You have a course coming up, don't you, sometime in the future?
I do. So I have a brand new course called Creatively You that is specifically designed for people who have this creative calling on their heart, but they just can't get their arms around it. They don't know what form it's supposed to take, or they don't know how to carve out time in their busy schedules to make it happen. Some people, somebody said to me, they just feel like they're spinning, like they have all these ideas and their life is in a major point of transition. So I tend to work a lot with women who have been in corporate careers and are looking at what's next. Is perfect for this program. They don't know if they want to write a book. Do they want to start a business? Is it just going to be a hobby? Are they starting a movement or a revolution? Like, they have all these ideas and dreams. All they know for sure is that they're super creative and they want to do something useful with their life. They want to leave a legacy. And so this is a program that's going to really help them explore every aspect of reclaiming their creative self so that they too can create a renaissance of who they're being and how they're showing up in the world.
That's great. Where can we find you and that program?
So where could you find that? I don't have a specific link, but if you go, you can find me on my website at www.minetteriordan.com. And I assume that'll be in the show notes. And so I don't need to spell that out for everybody. And it's super easy to contact me if you're interested in the Creatively You program. Then you can just send me a message. I'm easy to find on social media everywhere. My aunt one time was trying to find my phone number and she looked me up online and she said, "You're so easy to find." I said, "Yes, I'm doing a good job." So my primary website is MinetteRiordan.com. That's the easiest place to find me.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on today and for sharing your painting behind you with us.
Oh, thank you. So that one was actually inspired by Marie Forleo. I was listening to her new book, Everything is Figure Outable. And I tend to paint people's energy a lot, especially when I'm listening to audiobooks or podcasts. I'm a huge podcast junkie. And so I'm listening, and this was me listening to Marie Forleo. She has the most bubbly, effervescent energy. And so that was my homage to her and her beautiful energy.
Great. Oh, well, thank you.